Good morning, guys. It's Miss Hewitt again, and I'm getting ready to read Chapter 9 of The River Between Us for you. Noah was no hand to write, though better than I'd feared, but the dates between his letters were long and shapeless. Then a scrawl of a pencil stub on the torn paper would come in a used envelope turned inside out. Mama wouldn't touch it, but she couldn't do anything else until she heard me read it. She couldn't do anything until she heard me read it out to us while she stared away at nothing, straining at the bit to see his face. He joined the 31st Illinois Infantry Regiment, organized after the awful defeat at Bull Run. He wrote a soldier's letter up from Jacksonville at Camp Dunlap. I squinted to find my brother between the lines. He was a little boastful at first for what he'd done, a little proud of not having a bath since he'd left home, pleased with himself for not getting the trots when half the camp was down sick. Beans would kill us from more than bullets, he wrote. At this first hint of dysentery at the camp, Kalinda went to work, pouring her blackberry cordial curve for the runs into every bottle she could find a cork for. It was like her to see the truth behind Noah's letters before the rest of us. They issued them no weapons at Camp Dunlap, and no uniforms either. Noah wrote to say the legs of his butternut jeans were going beards. They were given rations of salt pork and dry beans to cook for themselves if they could, or eat raw. That and $13 a month was their pay. It was an army that didn't know how to be an army, and it treated its soldiers like beasts of the field. Men and boys, lost in a pasture, Delphine said, shrugging elaborately at the helplessness of the other sex, and maybe Yankees. Even after the first frost, the boys were still living outdoors. No canvas to sleep under, no blankets between them and the ground. We didn't have blankets, but we bundled up our patchwork quilts. Then, when we were wondering how to send them off, we heard the 31st had been ordered down to Cairo to Camp Defiance. I'd have kept that news from Mama if I could. She'd come to terms with Noah soldiering up to Jacksonville, further from the South than we were ourselves. But everybody said that our war, the war on the river, would be waged from Cairo. From our ignorance, we still couldn't believe they'd send boys unprepared into battle, though I suppose Cass knew better in the way she knew things. 2 terrible weeks followed without a line from Noah, but we had word from Cairo. When Dr. Hutchinson's learned there weren't enough army doctors to go around, he shut up his Grand Tower office and went down there on his own. The accounts he had sent back were posted by the landing. All Grand Tower read them, because the 31st was an Egyptian regiment made up of our boys. Dr. Hutchinson's reported that half the 31st were down with measles and the other half were drunk. Cairo had shut its saloons and was anxious for battle to begin to get the soldiers off the streets and out of their gutters. Delphine and I read the doctor's words and resolved to keep them from Mama, but somehow she knew. It was October now, with the days dwindling around us. I'd become a fitful sleeper, staring at the dark ceiling half the night, listening to Cass's soft snore from the trundle at my feet. The brittle leaves skating across our windows sounded too much like the hands scratching to get in. I heard every little noise in the sighing house. No scuttle on the walls got past me. Then one night I knew someone was down in the kitchen. I dreamed of Noah and somehow thought he'd found his way home. I dreamed his hand was knocking at the kitchen door. Some stirring from below brought me around, and I came bolt awake. The floorboards were cold when I carefully put my foot out of bed. At the top of the stairs, I saw no light from the kitchen. Still, somebody was there. I wished for Pa's fowling piece as I started down with nothing in my hands. I was quiet, but anything with ears could hear the popping of the stairs. The only light came from the last embers on the hearth. A figure stood there by the kitchen table. In the first moment, I was a haunt with long, tangled gray hair, hiding its face. Hearing me, the ghost turned, and I saw who it was. Mama? I hung there in the doorway. I hadn't startled her. She seemed to think she sent for me, and maybe she had. She stood there in her old nightdress, worn paper thin, without a shawl. Mama, you'll catch your death. I hope I do, she said. I can't live like this. I want him back. Mama, we all want him back. He's bad sick, you know, she said. He is. I know things. Where do you think Cass gets it? She gets it from me. I want him back, and you go get him. She rapped the table with her knuckles. I imagined how her eyes burned brighter than the embers, like something crouching out in the timber. I felt the heat of her eyes on me. Did you hear me? She said in a terrible whisper. He's sick. My boy's sick. Go to him. Nurse him till he can travel. Then bring him back to me. I wasn't deaf at all. The floor yawned at my feet. "Are you deaf?" she said in a cold voice I'd never heard. "Mama, if I could find him, they wouldn't let me have him. He's a soldier." My head throbbed. How could I reason with her? "If he got well, Mama, they'd send him into battle." "Go get him," she said, hearing nothing. "Wait till daylight, then go out. Don't come back without him." I was crying like a lost child now. This wasn't the Mama I'd known. Who is this heartless stranger? "Mama, I can't. I wouldn't know how. You and me'll go. We'll look for Noah together." She laughed then, and I wish I could forget that laugh. "I see what you'd do. You lure me away from the house. And what if he started home already? What if he come home and found me gone?" She whipped around, quick her flying hair, like she had heard Noah's footfall on the porch. And I know I'd lost her. She'd been whittled to madness by her fear. She looked back at me, one last time. The merciful dark hid her face. I waited for his pa to come home. I wore out with waiting. And what for? I won't wait for Noah. I ain't got that kind of time now. Don't come back without him. I can spare you, but I can't spare him. That blow sent me staggering. I'd have cut and run from her, but another figure stood behind me in the shadows of the hall, and another ghostly figure. I was too numb for fear now, and it was Kalinda, tall as the door in the long pillar of her nightdress. She will always be Kalinda to me. Her real name, her African name, Con, came from too far away. I wanted to throw myself into her arms. I needed to be in somebody's arms. "Light a lamp," Kalinda said. She'd heard it all, or enough. With a shaking hand I brought fire on a straw from the last ember to the lamp. Mama had slumped into a chair. She was staring away from me, as if I could be gone already. "This one, we take her to bed," Kalinda said. And we did. We got Mama between us, and she even leaned on me, heavy up the stairs. But when we got her into bed, she turned her face to the wall. Still, it wasn't daylight. We went back down to the kitchen, and Kalinda made a pot of her powerful New Orleans coffee. And it didn't warm me. The cold of the floor climbed to my legs. My heart was frozen. I reeled at how quick my life had come to an end. I couldn't go, but I couldn't stay. I didn't doubt that Noah was sick. He'd have the trots by now, the way they were eating. We'd heard about the pneumonia the boys had brought with them from the wet ground they'd slept on in Jacksonville. We knew about the measles, and there was typhoid talk. But Dr. Hutchinson had said Cairo was a pest hole. But how could I go? I didn't know where the world was, nor how to get there. Gray light streaked the windows. Kalinda sat across the table from me, hung in my shawls, warming her long hands on the mug. "Me? I stay at home," she said the moment before I could ask her to go with me. "I see to things here." Kalinda was such a miser with her words that you could believe every one of them she said. Still, I had to say it. "But they's sickness down there, and you know the cures." Did it dawn on me that I was asking her to help her enemies, if that what our side was to her? Her arms were folded now, and her face seemed darker in the brightening day. "I send the cures with you. You and Delphine." "Delphine? What earthly god would—" "If you go among men," Kalinda said, "she come in handy. She's more meant for men." And Kalinda said no more. We went to Cairo, Delphine and me, in the great journey of my life. We went to try and find Noah, if he was alive, and bring him back if we could. Delphine was fierce to go, though whether it was the monetary that moved her or love for Noah, I was in no position to ask. It took us some great days to get ready. Cass and Kalinda combed the timber of jimsonweed and bloodwort and all the cures we were to take with us. We emptied out our sick drawer and gathered up all the lumps of our good homemade soap and all the eats we could carry, pots of this and jars of that, wrapped in Noah's warm winter clothes, and all the quilts we could force into the trunks. 2 trunks too heavy for us to shift on our own, a hamper, and a hat box. Delphine needed dresses upon dress, her stays and chimneys and everything else that went underneath, and cloaks and capes because November was upon us, and a dozen pair of socks, her chlorine toothwash, even her cut coral necklace. On our last night at home, she retrimmed 2 traveling hats for us, with close veils. I suppose we'd wait for the next boat heading south, but Delphine wouldn't hear of it. Who knew when the next boat would stop? Besides, she had an unpleasant experience on a boat at Cairo. We'd go on the train. My mind flickered and went back at the thought. I'd never seen a train, nor the tracks it ran on. It meant rounding up Pegleg Nelson and his buckboard to carry us and our boxes over to Carbondale, miles and miles of bad road. It meant going in the middle of the night to get there in time to meet the train. It meant stepping off the backbone into thin air for me, who'd never been out of the county. We did a big baking that last afternoon, biscuits that would pack better than loaves. Cass wrung the necks off 4 big fryers she knew by name. Birds flopped headless in the yard, then popped in the pan. We ate hearty ourselves, and Cass put aside all the drumsticks and gizzards, Noah's favorites. I couldn't meet her eye when she handed me the hamper. I dared not promise her Noah, but I see her yet in my mind, holding out her offering. In all this frenzy, Kalinda took the time to lay out her cards and give them a reading. She often did, but this evening when Cass peered over her shoulder to see the cards for herself, Kalinda sent her away. She pointed a long finger at the far side of the room, and Cass went. After Kalinda had studied the cards with special care, she scooped them, and something passed between her and Delphine. Something just that quick, no more than a word or two in one of their languages. I couldn't have slept. When I was ready to go with my hat on, I stood in the darkness at the door of Mamma's room. She was still as a dead woman in her bed, her head turned away, but the house was astir around her. She was awake. I stood there to let her know I was going because she could spare me. And that was chapter 9 of The River Between Us.